Hi, AP World students, Mrs. Longnecker here, and as we're coming to the close of Unit 4, there's an important topic that we still need to talk about, and that's what I want to cover in this video. So one of the key concepts that we need to address with this video is the fact that as empires were expanding and consolidating their power, right, we've been talking about that since Unit 3, with the expansion and consolidation of power for land empires. In Unit 4, we saw a very similar process for the maritime empires that expanded overseas to claim territory or claim exclusive trade access, and those kinds of things, right? Expanding their power. This was not a predetermined process. This was not an inevitable process that was just naturally going to happen. And in fact, all of these empires experienced challenges to the power of their state. And so I want to talk a little bit about some challenges to state power. We can classify challenges to state power in two important ways. We can classify challenges to state power as external challenges or as internal challenges. And sometimes, depending on the historical development that you're looking at, a challenge might have elements of both external or internal challenge. But an external challenge to state power is going to be, we could think of this as state versus state conflict, or a force outside of the state or the empire challenging the power and authority of that state. We talked about this a little bit as with the expansion of land empires in Unit 3, right? Where one of the things that limited their expansion, and they just didn't infinitely expand over all the face of the earth, was that they ran into other powerful states, and that posed a challenge to the expansion of their power. So there's geographic limitations or political rivalries that pose challenges or limitations. In some cases, these challenges or limitations to state power that are external aren't necessarily state versus state. It may be another outside force acting on the state itself to limit or to go against the expansion of that state's power. And we'll look at an example of that as well. The internal challenges, which I'm not going to deal with very much in this video, but I want you to be aware of. The internal challenges would be things like resistance or rebellion from within the borders that a state controls or that a state claims control over. This can also result from a weakness within the government itself. So revolutions, resistance movements, rebellions, all of those would be examples of internal challenges to state power. And these are also very significant in this 1450 to 1750 time period. So I want to talk through just two examples of external challenges today to give you a sense of some of the different ways that these challenges played out. In the Indian Ocean, one of the things that we can look at and see an example of external challenge is the conflict that develops between the Portuguese and the Ottoman Empire. In this period, 1450 to 1750, both of these states were powerful empires, powerful political and economic entities in their regions. We know that the Ottoman Empire controlled territory throughout the Middle East and parts of Northern Africa, pushing into Eastern Europe, pushing towards Central Asia. So a large, powerful land empire. The Ottomans were also a major force of trade in the economy throughout the Indian Ocean. They had merchants and traders who traded in East Africa, in India, all the way to Southeast Asia. And the Ottomans were one of the more powerful Islamic states during the period. And so other Muslim states, including the Mughals in India and smaller Islamic states in Southeast Asia, saw the Ottomans as religious leaders as well as political and an economic force in their region. The Portuguese were relative newcomers to the Indian Ocean in this period, 1450 to 1750, and they didn't spread and conquer a lot of territory in this region, right? The Portuguese established control over trade networks through their trading post empire. They had small fortified trading posts along the coastline, both in East Africa and in South Asia, and spreading into even Southeast Asia as well. And they sought to take control of the trade networks in part through the Cartaz system and the armed trade that they brought to the region. They put cannons on their merchant vessels and brought naval ships to follow the merchant waterways and make sure that everyone was paying some kind of fee to the Portuguese so that they were benefiting off of all of the trade in the region. And so these two powers, right, major political and economic powers in this region, came into both economic and military conflict. We see military conflict and fighting between the Ottomans and the Portuguese in Ethiopia, in East Africa, and particularly in Southeast Asia as well. Naval battles, but even land conflicts at times between these two forces. And one of the key significances of this is that each state represents a challenge or a limitation to the expansion of the other state through force. So the Ottomans represent a challenge to the expansion of Portuguese domination in the region because they were powerful enough in a naval sense to defeat, in some cases, Portuguese warships and allow trade to bypass this Portuguese system. Likewise, the Portuguese, by bringing their armed vessels into the Indian Ocean, limits the expansion of Ottoman power throughout the region and prevents the Ottomans from becoming the sole dominant power within the Indian Ocean. So both of these are external challenges to the power of the other. Another example we can look at and think about when we're thinking about external challenges to state power was located both in the Indian Ocean, but also in the Caribbean. So thinking about things that are occurring across the globe. And that would be the effect of piracy on the expansion of power and particularly the expansion of trade control of some of these expanding states. So piracy and pirates would broadly be defined as anybody with a ship who is targeting merchant vessels of an enemy country. And in some cases, these are independent folks, and in other cases, they are aligned with specific political entities as well. But piracy has existed in human history essentially since trade via boat existed. But in this early modern 1450 to 1750 period, it's often known as the golden age of piracy, if you're into that kind of a thing. Right? Pirates of the Caribbean movies are set during this time period because there's so much more trade happening across the seas that pirates had significant opportunities to gain wealth for themselves. So we see independent pirates robbing and capturing ships for personal economic gain, right? For profit and plunder. But we also see privateers, and these are pirates who are licensed by various governments to harass the merchant ships of that government's enemies. So you might see a ship carrying, right, a license, a specific document from the British government, giving them permission from the British government to harass Spanish ships. So this is a way that states, kind of through proxies, were able to limit the expansion of their political rivals because they made it more dangerous for trade to occur without significant resources to protect those merchant vessels. And this limits the expansion of the empires because they have to spend resources protecting what they already have rather than expanding their power into new regions. And so piracy really reflects another challenge to state power. As we think about pirates, right, we want to acknowledge that, like, the kind of cultural idea of piracy, making it seem like a grand and glorious thing really isn't true. The life of pirates was hard, it was dangerous, it was inconsistent. And for every pirate who was wildly successful and became fabulously wealthy, there were many, many, many others who were enslaved, who were oppressed, who were unable to gain any kind of profit and ended up dying violently or through illness or just in poverty. So I don't want to suggest that this is a glorification of piracy in this lesson, but rather recognizing that this is kind of already in our cultural ideas of history in this time period, and how does it relate to the bigger historical ideas that we've already talked about. All right, so those are two good examples of external challenges to state power. In a future lesson, we are going to look at some internal challenges to state power, as well as at least one example of a historical development that could be considered a little bit of both, depending on whose perspective you look at it from history. So I hope you'll come back and join for those future lessons. In the meantime, stay well, keep working hard, and I'll see you later. Bye!